Hi there, I'm Jen Cannell. As part of our special edition of the Dear Beth podcast, we thought we'd share some bonus content from our conversation with Honourable Justice Georgina Jackson. Now, her career is nothing short of remarkable. She serves as a judge on the Court of Appeal here in Saskatchewan. She co-chaired the National Advisory on Judicial Ethics. She's taught judicial ethics in places as far away as Morocco and Germany. She's a past president of the Canadian Institute for the Administration of Justice, and Justice Jackson has lent her leadership to numerous national boards and committees. She shares her knowledge with so many people in her field. But beyond this distinguished career, Justice Jackson shared something truly special with Beth Bilson, a deep friendship built on both a shared history and a shared commitment to justice and equality. Beth, of course, is one of the co-authors of Creating a Seat at the Table, Reflections from Women in Law, alongside Bree Lowenberger and Leah Howie. Now, in this conversation, Justice Jackson reflects on what Beth Bilson meant to her personally and professionally. She reflects on the enduring significance of creating a seat at the table and why the work of advancing equality is far from over. Here's Justice Georgina Jackson.
In addition to this book's many attributes, it's a history lesson. The Honourable Rosalie Abella in her podcast in this series demonstrates that with her overview of key milestones on the equality journey. Others in the book talk about this too. Just a quick recap. In 1968, the Royal Commission on the Status of Women in Canada was released. Then the National Association of Women Lawyers was formed in 1975. That's close to my heart. The Constitution was patriated in 1982, which gives constitutional protection to many for the first time and significantly recognizes Indigenous rights. Rosalie Abella's report on equality in employment is released in 1984. Section 15 of the Charter is proclaimed in 1985. And then there's the big push to determine what the Constitution means in protecting equality and other rights. If you look at the contributors in the book against this timeline, so if you matched us all up where we were at, when did we graduate in law school? What were we doing in our lives along this timeline? We all fall somewhere along it. Not surprisingly, of course, we all do follow a history line, but I think because of the topic, it's particularly interesting. Beth Bilson started university in 1969 and graduated law school in 1978. As one of the organizers of the book, her story isn't in it. Beth's story will be written elsewhere. But in many respects, her story is the book, or the book is her story. She followed and participated in much of the change that I just described. She was part of it, and she was making it, and she was building on it. She was the chair of the Bilson Report, which was an independent pay equity task force that conducted a review of the Canadian Human Rights Act and made recommendations. That's back in the 2000s. On the continuum of working towards equality. You can see her story in the choices that she made to be involved in education, labor law, arbitrations, and being the first woman chair of the Labor Relations Board. We can also see it in who she chose to be authors in this book. I have to say, we owe a debt of gratitude to all of the organizers, but today we're talking about Beth. Making space for others was one of her defining characteristics. Education, which I already talked about, is crucial to many of society's problems. Education was one of Beth's tools to bring about change. Research was another. She was, for example, the editor of the Canadian Bar Review. This book brings all of Beth's talents together. Education, research, advocacy, and inclusion. That's Beth. Now, when I was thinking about this answer, I didn't want to stop there because there's an aspect about legacy which is both past and future. Beth and her colleagues, the organizers of this book, set out to create a community around the conversation of equality and inclusion. they envisaged that the 18 of us would continue to talk together and build out from there. I think this will happen. It will be part of Beth's legacy. I think we must make it happen. Victor Hugo said something like, perseverance is the secret of all triumphs, and lawyers know this lesson well. So if we've got a goal, we want to meet it. One of the contributors to the book, the Honourable Michelle Holland, said that we should think much bigger than we do. Picking up on that line, linking it to another line in the book about a possible future Royal Commission, not just about women, but more broadly about Section 15, that too could come to pass. A study on how wealth and health in Canada are tied to equality would be a wonderful legacy of Beth's work. As you know, I was a contributor to the book. In preparation for today, I reread all the stories, and some of them I read twice. I found myself saying, I'd like to come to know these women better. That's how impressive the book was for me. I'd like to have lunch with each of them and continue to learn about them and from them. Their stories are interesting, they're real. It's like reading the best of biography, where, by happenstance, you know the individuals. Or because we're all linked to the College of Law of Saskatchewan, we feel like we know each other. We have a shared experience that comes through in the stories. Obviously, each of us is coming from a different perspective, a different generation. It seems like we know each other. That said, every person reading this book could learn something from it. Now, obviously, there's greater relevance to a person who's gone through the journey of law, but I think every person, even someone like me who's at the end of their career, could learn something. There are universal themes, the themes of hope, risk-taking, admitting vulnerability, recovering from tragedy, recovering from failure. And then there also is a universal theme of gratitude. Yes, it's most relevant to individuals who are in law or associated with law, but anyone could learn something from the book. On the point of its particular relevance to the law, no matter where you are at in your law journey, there's a story in this book for you. If you're struggling in law school or in private practice, you will find a story from which you can learn and take some solace, if not advice. If you're wondering, for example, whether to make a career change or even to leave the practice of law, there's something for you in this book too. It really is a book about finding your place in life, place in law, place in society as we know it today. Yes, the stories are about success and personal resolution, and that's the book's broad strength. But I think it's a book of advice. Consider it a modern book of manners, something to live by for lawyers and judges. But it's the lawyers and judges living in these times. So at bottom, the book is 18 women telling how each of them has lived her life. The fact that it is about individuals who are partway through their careers gives each story a freshness. Nonetheless, I'd say there are common lessons to be learned. For example, every piece talks about the importance of mentors. There's a line in the book to the effect that we are better together. It's a great line. And it's echoed elsewhere in different phrases. Phrases like, we can do nothing alone, finding your people. All of these phrases point to relationships. That's a common theme. Other themes are about risk-taking and not settling just because we found a place. Individuals in this book are constantly questioning. Another thread is, it's something that Beth Bilson said in one of her podcasts that resonates with me. It's about gratitude for what others have done, for equality, and for us as individuals. I think it's also about being measured and continually checking yourself as to what your own biases might be. In short, a reader could take each story and ask the question, what advice is this person trying to tell me? I don't think you would be disappointed in looking at the book through that frame. There are also lovely vignettes and details from people's lives. Courtney Phillips, who is part of one of the other podcasts, she talks about a much appreciated email sent to her from a fellow student on the eve of an examination. Another contributor, Senator Yvonne Boyer, talks about her first days at the College of Law. You cannot help be touched by the fact that these women have been prepared to reveal these stories and about the stories themselves. I'd like to make another comment, bouncing off of what one of the commentators or contributors to the book said. She was looking to a time when federally or provincially regulated requirements on equality will not be necessary. I'm going to take the very pessimistic. I would prefer to think, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think that time will ever come. We'll get better at creating equal spaces, equal places. But if we don't have laws, we will backslide because it's so much easier to hire or promote someone who looks like us. To take one example, when I think about judicial decision making, I think about impartiality. It is a requirement. It is a requirement of law that judges be impartial. Equality is an essential part of that. We don't take impartiality for granted. We must guarantee it by a law. That's what makes this book so relevant, is because it can continue to reinforce that idea. If we turn the tables for a moment and think about inequality, inequality is a social problem. We have to recognize that. It might even be the social problem. If you listen to a newscast through the lens of equality and think about what would be different, would this story occur if we did not have an unequal society, I think the answer would be we wouldn't. That particular problem that you're listening to that's being described is resolvable through a commitment to equality. Perhaps I am doing my own blue sky and creating my own utopia, but that's what strikes me, at least at this moment. I think about inequality being a social problem because it's at the heart of most pressing health issues inflicting society. But that's just one example. And we can backslide on equality just as we can on any other social issue. At the outset, I mentioned equality is vigilance. This book requires us to be vigilant and to do the necessary and continual examination of conscience that's required. Just by way of a bit of a preface to all of that, you have to understand that I entered law school when I was just on the eve of my 21st birthday. And I was appointed to the Court of Appeal 18 years later. So I have a frame, a trajectory and a frame, much of which has permitted me to be a watcher from the sidelines. Much of it has required me to be a watcher from the sidelines, that I couldn't be an activist. But I have been watching and listening and hearing from others. One point that must be made is that equality requires vigilance. And I want to explain what I mean by that. And I think we start from the broad proposition that human behavior is regulated by one's own conscience, by morals, by ethics, professional or otherwise, by organizational guidelines, by norms, and by law, or by a collection of laws, if you will. I find myself at this point in my career asking, where does equality or inclusion of the other come in that list of what controls human behavior? Is it left to the individual or the individual organization or by law? And that, I admit, is a trick question because in some respects it's governed by all of that. The commitment to good behavior is regulated by all of the above. And good behavior includes and extends to the equal treatment of the other, equal treatment for everyone. For most of us, however, we have to have rules with consequences to ensure good behavior on all fronts. And rules with consequences are what regulations and laws are all about. So then I ask myself the question, what if society begins to think equality isn't so important anymore? What if it is considered to be uneconomical, which is false? But what if it is perceived to be uneconomical? Or worse yet, that equality is not a good thing? Majority opinions, I've learned, can change rapidly. We see this in other countries, and perhaps what is happening elsewhere in other countries makes us pause and wonder how secure is our commitment to equality. A universal theme in the book, Creating a Seat at the Table, is that the work on the equality file, if you can call it that, is far from over. One writer in the book forcefully states, and I will paraphrase what she says, significant gender disparity exists in society. What if we haven't achieved equality or don't achieve equality before we start reversing the gains already achieved? What is the continuing relevance of creating a seat at the table? I think the book is a key part of the conversation. Or better still, and a better way of looking at it, it's a key part of the education we all need. We need to hear and to hear continually and repeatedly from young people, in this case, law students, young lawyers, and lawyers in mid-career as well, about how are we doing on the equality file? Are we getting it right? Have we got the right balance? And how could we be doing things better? I think that conversation, of which the book is a catalyst, makes this book particularly relevant in our times. The proof, or objective proof, can be found in the podcasts. I listened to most of the podcasts, and I found that perhaps the greatest strength of the book may be in what it has created and will create after it.
That was Justice Georgina Jackson.